Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is Grant Cameron, and I want to welcome you. And if you're in the here and now, you're welcome as well. Today, I have a really special guest. I was actually with my friend who was driving the car in 1975 when I first had my sighting that dragged me down the rabbit hole. I was talking to his wife, and I said, I won't be around to visit. My friend's been in the hospital now with stroke for 8 months. And I said, I won't be around tomorrow. I have to interview. I'm interviewing the webmaster for Shirley MacLaine. She went, what? She's not into this kind of stuff, but she knew who it was. So I've got Brit Elders on today, and I've got a couple of other people, a bunch of authors today. My assistant, Desta Barnaby, is here. And we wrote the book Contact Modalities, which I'll refer to a couple of times today. Um, and she is the author of two books, and Mirroring Worlds and A Glimpse into Infinity. So you can go to Desta will put the link to the books, my books, and Desta's books. So we've worked on a number of different projects, and we are now working on a double book together on all the different paranormal phenomena and how they all overlap each other. So Desta's here. Welcome, Desta. And I also have my longtime friend Paola Harris, who's joining us from Boulder, Colorado. And Paola has written a number of books as well. She's written Eyes Only, the story of Clifford Stone and the UFO crash retrievals, Connecting the Dots, making sense of the UFO phenomena, UFOs, how does one speak to a ball of light? And she's co-author with Jacques Vallée of the read and best-selling book Trinity, the Best Kept Secret, and one other book that I forgot to put down. And Paula and I are actually doing a session next week, next August the 3rd. We're doing an event where we're going to talk about rediscovering the 1950 ET communications from Wilbur Smith to Giant Rock. And Paula's going to talk about the contactees from the 1950s. I'm going to talk about Wilbert Brockhouse Smith, who ran the Canadian government UFO program, who was also a contactee. And he was also in contact with the contactees of the 1950s. So we have that event next August, August the 3rd, next Saturday. And we'll put that in the link. Desta will stick that in the link for us. And we're also going to be, Paula and I will be getting together next May, and I'll let Paula, once I introduce her, talk just for a couple minutes about what we're going to do. Next May, we are going to have an event in Boulder, in Crestone, Colorado, and Brit Elders, who's on our guest today, is actually going to be joining us for a weekend. We're going to do an entire weekend together. So can you just give us a little brief synopsis? This is the first time we made this public. So Paula, can you sort of talk a little bit about that, and then I'll bring in Brit and we'll get going, and I'll introduce what we're going to be talking about today.
Yes, thank you so much, Grant. And hi, Brit. It's so good to be with you. I want to add that when Brit and Grant start talking about the Billy Meier case, when I was living in Italy, I went to see Billy Meier. So I am so excited that we're going to be talking about that today and about human type ETs. Now, what I want to do next May 23rd, 24th, and 25th is get together with my friends Grant Cameron and Brit Elders and have a serious conversation about data and then a journey to consciousness. That's exactly where I'm at right now, because I started with data, and then a Grant dragged us all down the rabbit hole into consciousness studies, which includes the paranormal, remote viewing, all kinds of phenomenon that is attached to dimensional phenomena, which is what the UFO phenomena is. So next, and it'll be up on www.starworks USA in November for people to sign up to do a weekend retreat with us face to face. It's a small number of people, so we really get a chance to meet everybody and answer questions and, you know, eat together. And we have a C5 under the stars, and it'll be really beautiful. So I am announcing that event with Greg, Brit Elders, and me Our Journey to Consciousness for May of 2025 under Starworks USA. Right now, I'm really excited to discover and talk about the real pioneer in all of this with Wendell Stevens, Brit Elders.
Yeah, good. So let's bring in Brit. Brit is the fourth author here today. She's an internationally published author. She focuses her research on work on nonfiction topics. She has written books, articles, documentary films, and has ghostwritten and edited for others with the goal of learning something new from each project. She is the CEO of Shirley MacLaine's website, a position she's held since its inception. She's an advocate for neuropathic health and healthy eating, which will interest Desta. Brit has hosted radio programs and has been a guest on radio and television in the United States as well as in other countries. Now, today, what Brit and I are going to talk about is she has just re-released a book. I actually was going to have it as the background, and then I guess I put it on the wrong computer. UFO's Contact with the Pleiades. And this is a very controversial subject. And basically, it is because contactees and anything to do with that's not technology. The UFO world today has turned into a world where it's boys and their toys. And I'm on a ship in a couple of months, and there's a bunch of panels on there, and there's not a single woman on the panel. Basically, what ufology has come down to is we want to know, what does the government know about UFOs? And I keep saying, what difference does it make what the government knows? They know. Give it up. And what about UFOs? Let's prove UFOs exist. UFOs exist. Let's get past that. Let's move on to the next rung here and figure out what's going on. So if you're a fighter pilot who's seen a light in the sky, that's big news. Everybody's talking about it. But if you're a contactee, they basically say to you, take a couple steps back, move away, or we'll bring out the cross and the nails. The contactees in the UFO community are basically the illegal immigrants of the UFO world. They basically, nobody wants anything to do with them. And they basically figure it's anecdotal. Anything other than that is not. But I have worked on this for many years, and we're going to deal with one of the most controversial experiencers and contactees is Billy Meier. Now, what I want to point out is this all started. Well, first, let me again go back to this thing about the skepticism about contactees. One of the things you got to remember when it comes to skepticism, whether you're posting on Facebook or whether you're posting on Twitter, is the following thing. Jim Semivan, who had the beings in his room, he's the equivalent of a two-star general in the CIA, pointed out the following. He said 53% of people in the United States are reading at a grade 6 level. 2/3 of people in the United States, if we put a map in front of them of the United States of America, they cannot find Miami on a map. And the one I bring out all the time is if you go and look up, you can Google search 2-year-old child, you'll see that a 2-year-old child has an attention span between 4 and 6 minutes. If you Google search attention span of somebody on the internet, it used to be 12 seconds. It's now down to 8 seconds. So whoever is criticizing you on Facebook about whatever your contact experience is, you got to remember they've not got past 8 seconds, and they now know more about you and what's going on than the generals, and they start typing. So you always have to keep that in mind, that a lot of this is, Desta and I wrote about this in Contact Modalities. What most skepticism is, it's what's called interpreter. It's in the left male ego brain, the left side of the brain. And it basically is when the brain has two things and there's a fact missing in between. There's a thing actually in the brain, it's called the interpreter, and it immediately comes up with an answer. So if Paola Harris says, oh, I saw an object hanging over the horizon in the west, the interpreter will immediately say, that's Venus. And once it makes the interpretation, it will not back off that interpretation. So that's basically what's happening. And what they discovered with split brain research in the 70s and 80s was Michael Gazzaniga, who made the discovery, said that the left brain interpreter is almost always wrong. I will say the left brain interpreter is always wrong. It's never right. And so you have to keep this in mind when you come to skepticism. Now, the case we have is one of the more skeptical, the more attack cases. Paola would be dealing with some of the others, the 1950 contactees, which take a lot of flack. And in dealing with Brit on this, she sent me the book and she sent me the video. And a number of years ago, I was actually going to do a book, and I'm now going to go forward and do the book. And I'm going to talk about just the beings. Who are we actually dealing with? Because you can actually see, there's a guy by the name of James Lukatsky who's come public. He ran the big DIA program for the US government. And he talks about him and Harry Reid and a guy from the executive branch being in a room and claiming that they had a briefing that said that they had a craft and they'd been inside the craft. And then Lukatsky said, and we discovered there was no engine. And then he said, so what are we dealing with? And that's the whole thing. What are we dealing with here? What's really going on? The Billy Meier case took place in 1975. What is significant that people should be pointed to start with is 1975 is a very significant year in the UFO community. The Billy Meier case started, I think, January the 28th, 1975. The case that got me involved started a couple of days later in Carmen, Manitoba. Started in February of 1975. My friend who's now in the hospital, I said to him, Larry, let's go and see what they're looking at. They say this thing's in Carmen. It's flying around all the time. Let's go and see. We didn't go till May of 1975, and I'll talk a film. I'm going to show a film that was taken that dragged me down the rabbit hole. And I'm going to show it here today. So 75 was when I started. This is when the Billy Meier case took place. It is the year of the most cattle mutilations. Cattle mutilations take place downwind and downstream from nuclear power activities. The most that ever happened was 1975. Bud Hopkins got dragged down the rabbit hole in 1975. There was a landing in a park. His friend told him about this landing in the park, and that these 10 aliens had come out and dug holes with little shovels, and they went back in with their little bag of stuff, and then they flew away. And Bud went and looked, and sure enough, there was 10 little holes. And he went, oh, and he that's when he started to get into the UFO thing. Linda Howe got a phone call from her brother from Malmstrom Air Force Base in 1975. And he said, Linda, there's UFOs over the nuclear weapons storage area at Malmstrom Air Force Base. She said, there's what? And then she got involved and she found the cattle mutilations that happened around Malmstrom. She found all this sort of stuff, and she got dragged down the rabbit hole. 1975 was also when Travis Walton was abducted in November of 1975. And here's one thing that people may not know is that I pointed out that Travis was gone for 5 days. On those 5 days, every single day that Travis was gone, there was a UFO over a nuclear weapons storage area or a nuclear weapons site at Malmstrom, every single day. Also, at exactly the same time that Travis Walton was abducted, the first book on near-death experiences took place. Raymond Moody released that book. So 75 was a pretty significant event, a series of events, which I don't think was random. Mine definitely wasn't random. The film that I'm going to show you today, I talked to the guy who shot it, and as he told me the story, he said, I saw this thing and it was on the ground and it was flaring up and it was going down, it was flaring up and it was going down. And he said, the next time it flares up, I'm going to shoot. And it was almost like the UFO said, ready, go. and the thing jumped in the air, and it's what Billy Meier called jumping. We called it a flash frame. I'm going to show it. And Billy Meier had one of these. And for 50 years, I've been in this for 50 years. I've never really made it public. I knew when I saw that film, the Billy Meier film, I said, oh, I've seen that before. That's called a flash frame. We saw it at night. So we saw the flash. The entire horizon lights up. And you'll see, I'm going to show the film. Jacques Ballet actually narrates the film that happened in Carmen, Manitoba. So with that said, welcome, Brit. And thank you for doing the book. Thank you for your investigation. And thank you for taking probably a lot more flack in the UFO community than I've ever taken. I really appreciate your being on, and I'm honored to discuss this case. And when we get into all the other contact cases, when we get together next year, I'm very honored that we can go down this road, because this is what it's about. What are we dealing with, and what is the message they have for us?
Right. Hi, Grant. Thank you so much. Hi, Paola. Yeah, this is... it right now feels like the timing is right. 1975 might have kicked the door open for so many of us. But right now, all of this information coming out is coming to a new generation that's very interested in the topic, wants to know because they think their place is out there in the universe. Plus, we have all of the issues of, government release, and I absolutely agree with you. It doesn't matter what the government says. It matters all the information that is available. People need to research that. They need to be aware of it. So many experiences, so many stories, so many things that can be documented, and it's there. We do need a place like a repository for all of it so that people can access it easily. But right now is the time that all of this needs to be coming to light.
Yeah, beautiful. And we sort of cry that we're sort of oppressed and nobody believes us. But if you go back to Max Planck, who was the guy who invented quantum physics, he's the
Right.
godfather of quantum physics. If you see him, he makes this famous expression: you do not win by convincing your opponent that he's wrong. Science advances when your opponent dies. It advances one funeral at a time. And when the new idea comes, the new generation is not offended with it. And basically, if you go to young people today, they'll say, "Oh yeah, there's aliens. Yeah, there's," and they accept all this kind of stuff. And we're just waiting for the old folks to sort of die away. And what we're doing here is we sort of put it out there. And I always say that we're no different than any other social or political movement. You got to put it out there. You got to discuss it. And eventually, we keep talking, and the consciousness we don't realize is rising. And at one point, everybody's going to make the right decision. It's just going to get to a point where it's going to flip. So again, thank you for bringing this out. So let's get into your involvement with this thing. You got involved a couple of years later, but you actually were part with your husband, Lee.
Yeah.
You were part of you had a company, an investigation company. So you weren't like somebody down at the corner bakery making cookies or something. I mean, you had a background in this. So tell us a story about how you discovered Billy Meier. And you were there, I believe, a year. It wasn't a couple of day investigation. You were there a long time.
Oh, 7-year investigation.
Yeah.
What happened was Wendell Stevens came to us and he had these photographs. This was 1975. And we looked at them and we said, they're too good to be true. Part of the reason that we did not want to get involved right then was we did have this company, Intercept. And the company was designed to investigate and prevent Fortune 500s and financial institutions from being eavesdropped or wiretapped. We had quite a reputation we had worked very hard for. We didn't want to throw our company into a UFO case and totally destroy that. Back in 75, that would have happened. So we said, no, they're too good to be true, which the photographs really did look too perfect. We backed out. Wendell went over to Switzerland, met with Billy, came back with more photographs and said, seriously, you got to take a look. Because we had an investigative background, and we know that whether it's murder one, counter-espionage work, or a UFO case, you follow the same criteria. You let the evidence dictate what happens. You don't just decide, oh, I'm going to go investigate a UFO case and make it up as you go along. You reach out to the people that have the information, the knowledge, the background, and the resources and equipment to do the analysis. Well, we had a business thing happening in London. We decided, okay, we'll pop over to Switzerland, debunk the case in one day, and head home. We were there that first trip for a week. Meier gave us photographs, movie footage, metal samples from the craft, and audio recordings that he had made while watching the craft. And he wasn't the only one that made these audio recordings. Plus, we interviewed over 24 witnesses. So we left 5 days later with all of this stuff going, okay, where do we start? What do you do first? And we decided to tackle the photographs because there were more photographs than anything else. Tackle those first. So we took them to Dr. Michael Malin down at U of A. Amazing man. He digitized all the photographs. He works on the various NASA projects by digitizing images and determining what the pixels tell you, size, shape, all of that. So he did that. Over a 7-year period of time, we took the photographs to different laboratories all around the world. The movie footage was analyzed in Japan and here in the US. The metal samples were analyzed at IBM. Some of them went to MIT. MIT would not release a report. The audio recordings were analyzed at Boeing Labs, at the Naval Facility in Groton, Connecticut, and by audio engineers in Hollywood. No one could duplicate what Meier had done. No one. And they definitely couldn't duplicate it all. So that was something that really was intriguing. All of that does is put credence behind Billy's claims of contact. Primarily things like the metal, where you had thulium, a rare earth element that was actually in the metal, as well as crystalline structures from a cold fusion process. Where would a farmer in Switzerland with a 6th grade education in one arm learn a cold fusion process when we couldn't do it in our major laboratories here? Where would he have the knowledge to incorporate thulium into that metal? He wouldn't. So all of this just supports his claims of contact. And that's kind of where you have to leave it, because he had the experience, no one else did. So no one really knows but Meier. However, all of the evidence that the Pleiadians supplied him says this man has been in contact with something that we know nothing about at that point in time.
So talk a little bit about the Pleiadians, and I can sort of, when I was reading your book, one of the things, I actually have a list of all the things that came to me that we may know some of it now, we didn't know in 1975. And one of the interesting things I noticed in the book, we stuck with the Pleiadians, but then Billy was told that it was actually the constellation Lyra was
Right.
where they started. One of the things, Desta and I wrote a book called Tuned In, The Paranormal World of Music. And we point out that John Denver believed he was from Lyra. He actually believed, he wrote a song called Spirit. It was released after he died. And if you take a look at the lyrics, you'll see he said he wondered what it would be like to be from Lyra. And the guy who wrote the lyrics to the song said, no, John Denver believed he was actually from Lyra. So you get this bizarre connection to the thing. But the Pleiadians, and one of the things I wanted you to maybe talk about the Pleiadians, and then this idea that when I do the book, I want to do this whole thing where you're sort of wondering, are the entities giving you the whole thing? Are they talking at your level? Because Desta and I dealt with Barbara Streisand's stepson, who is a full-blown experiencer. And what he told us was that he was told that when we come into your world, we go into your head and we see what's in your head. And it's with that we build a lesson for you. So when you have the Pleiadians, can you talk about them, when it started for Billy and when it stopped? And this idea, I think you mentioned in one interview that there was this odd thing that he was supposed to be the only one who was in contact with Pleiadians. And then suddenly you started getting other people from around the world who were making the same sort of contacts with different Pleiadian.
Right. Yeah, wow. The Pleiades, they're a young star system. Science says that really they can't support life because they're too young. But the story behind how the Pleiadian people got there is very different. They originated in Lyra. They had a warring faction planet, much like ours is today, and they ended up destroying that planet. The difference is those people had the technology to leave the planet before it was destroyed and to go into another sector of space and actually engineer a different planet so they could live there. Paola, you want to take that a second?
Yeah, the interesting part is that we have a lot of this in a book that Wendell Stevens wrote called Messages from the Pleiades. And I had asked Brit about that before I went to see Billy Meier, because I was living in Italy. I mean, it's next door. I went with 3 Italians. I spent 5 hours in the Tucson airport doing my homework with Wendell Stevens. And Wendell Stevens, for me, is the greatest researcher that ever lived, because he did worldwide. And he had talked about that he had done these books called Messages from the Pleiades. So he gave, and I have them here, and I don't know, Brit, if those are going to be redone or re-released, because yes, I mean, I'm glad you've got 2 women here, because we don't just care about the craft, we care about what's inside, who's inside. 350-degree view of this phenomenon. So I don't know, Brett. You were talking about the. I guess they call them Pleiadians, not even Pleiadians. You want to go on and talk
Yeah.
about that?
Um, well, the Pleiadians, that's the name Billy gave us back in 75. Somehow it's morphed to Playaran or something else since then. But I go with what he told us because we spent hours and hours conversing with the man. He said they came from the Pleiades. Their planet's name was Era. They engineered the planet so they could live there. And he said that this was something that we don't have the capabilities of doing as a race right now on our planet. And that's why they're very concerned. They're concerned because they look at us like they're little brothers and little sisters. They say their forefathers are our forefathers. They really feel it's important that we recognize we are not the only thinking beings in the universe. That's the primary reason that they came to Billy. And it went over a period of time. His initial contact happened when he was 5 years old with his father. His father and he looked up, saw this craft in the air. He says, "What's that?" His dad turned to him and said, "It must be one of Hitler's craft." That was it. Billy began having telepathic communications at that point. And this seems to be very common with contactees, by the way. There's something with that age range of 5 to 6 that they initially have some type of contact. It was no different for Billy. And then there was a period where there was no contact. Then they started up again. And this would go on and off. They actually studied Billy for a period of 10 years before they made the contact in 1975. They wanted to make certain that he would be capable of taking this evidence that they were going to give him, getting it to the right people to be analyzed, and then holding true to his beliefs. Because many people that are contactees, and I know you guys have talked to them, I know I have, the first sign of trouble, which they do get from the UFO communities, they back off and they don't want to talk about it anymore. And they've had these incredible experiences that are not being shared and really should be. So that's what happened with Billy in the beginning. The Pleiadians are still in contact with him. I just spoke with Billy the other day. We Zoom back and forth and we talk quite frequently and email frequently. And they do still come to him and talk to him, but they don't need to provide any more evidence. They've asked him, "What more do you need? You have all of this documentation that could not be created back in 1975. What else do you need?" So that, to me, I think is fascinating because so many contacts today do not provide physical evidence, but they provide incredible information. And in so many cases, that's being lost because the people don't have the gumption to come forward, the courage, and it does take some. You're right. We suffered the slings and arrows of the UFO community. A lot of it was because we would not turn the evidence over to them. And we thought, no, the private sector out there is where people have the equipment necessary to analyze these things. I'm glad we kept it that way. What would have happened had we turned it over to the UFO organizations? It probably would have been just set aside and not paid any attention to for a long time.
And yet there was a lot of the stuff went missing, correct?
From Billy, yes.
Yeah.
He was so, oh my gosh, he was so open. And just people would come in and say, "Oh, can I take this picture and then I'll have a copy made of it and bring it back?" Well, they never brought it back. A lot of people surreptitiously took images out of his photo albums or slides out of the slide albums. We were given the movie footage, thank goodness, because no one had a chance to tamper with it. which I think probably would have happened. The metal samples, Billy, it's so funny. When he brought them out to us, he comes trotting out of his bedroom, which doesn't have a door. They didn't have indoor plumbing at that time when we were there. And it just had a curtain. And he pushes the curtain back and he comes out and he has this pink, tattered shoebox. And in the shoebox, he's got film canisters. And he says, "This is for you." And it was metal samples from the craft. And he had it stashed in his bedroom in a little pink shoebox. So security was not at the top of his mind at all. It was he just trusted everybody. And he was so open and willing to discuss things. A curious man, not educated like we think of, but worldly. He had traveled the Middle East, he had traveled through Europe. He understood people, he could understand various different languages. He spoke English with us. Just a very open, receptive, earthy man.
Yeah, I don't think people forget that. I don't think, like, when you got the first stuff, he just
Yeah.
gave it to you, right? He didn't charge you. Everybody thinks,
No.
well, he's making money, or I mean, he was a very poor guy, correct?
Yeah. No, he just gave it to us. He didn't say, "Oh, you give me this and I'll give you that." He said, "You take it, you have it evidenced, you find out what's true." That was his attitude.
Go ahead,
Yeah.
Paul.
What's interesting is, that I've done extensive work on human type aliens, the Space Brother movement, South America. Both he and Adamski had been to India. Both he and Adamski had lived in India. Both he and Adamski had a spiritual mindset that came out of India, Tibet, and did too. And I think that we need to look at that, because when a certain ET group choose a contactee, they're going to choose one that is in alignment with some kind of idea, not just somebody that is going to put it in a religious box, but in a spiritual philosophy box.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
even the idea that is now popular, it wasn't in 75, because I was there in 75. It was very simple, is this idea of the three waves, that we all may have agreed to come in here at this time in this place in the middle of whatever mess we find ourselves in, and for a particular reason. So all this may be prearranged, and there is the pattern that you mentioned with Adamski and the India thing. There's also the pattern that you mentioned about him seeing the UFO when he was 5 years old. We now know that. We did not know that in 1975, that there was this pattern where a child would be taken or contacted, then there'd be this long period of time, and then they would recontact them. Chris Bledsoe had the same thing as a little child, and he thought they were Indians, and he would sort of play with these, had these encounters, and that's what we don't realize. Even the idea of multiple encounters. I remember 75 is 75. If you had one UFO sighting, you were crazy. If you claim to have more than one UFO sighting, like, nobody's even going to talk to you. I mean, we don't realize that. We always think that what happened now happened in 75, and that's what's so amazing to me, is I was there in 75, and it's a completely different world. Is like you start to see these patterns that Billy fit into, that now are accepted patterns, but he was the first. Like the Pleiadians. Did you know of anybody that talked about Pleiadian stuff before Billy? Is there anything on the record?
And we looked. We even talked to the UFO organizations. Has anybody ever mentioned Pleiadian? And no one had.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, the people don't realize that there's this pattern. I even say to people, like, what happened to the aliens from 1896? They were flying around in these wooden ships, and supposedly they came from Mars on these wooden ships and stuff like that. And then they disappeared. And then the Foo Fighters came, and then they disappeared. Then the Green Fireballs came, and they disappeared. And the 50s, all the contactees from the 50s, they all sort of disappeared. And it's almost like they're turning the pages of a book, and they're leading us through this, almost like it's. And the question is, what's really going on? I mean, and it's almost like they're going according to what Chris Peters, Barbara Streisand's stepson, said. Whatever your level of intelligence is, that's what they have no other choice. They've got to talk to you at whatever level you're at. And if you're a spiritual person, you've got this background, of course, they're going to use you because you're at that level. They can't talk to somebody who knows nothing about anything. It's just not going to work.
Yeah, they're very concerned about our spirituality on this planet too, because they say our technology is outstripping our spirituality, where
Yeah.
it should be in harmony. There needs to be a balance between what they call creational growth, understanding that we are all a part of creation, and the technology. And what we've done is we've become so tech oriented, so tech focused in every single thing we do. We don't do the inner work anymore. It's difficult for people to really find the time to meditate, which is so sad. And that's just one of the things that you do to create that connection between you and creation.
Yeah, Paula sort of mentioned this idea that he wrote everything down, which is another characteristic that you'll get with experiencers. Every single thing that happens, they've got the one guy out of Utah, he's got like 700 pages of notes from the 1960s on.
Yeah.
And so Billy got a lot of stuff that was the I guess you'd call them the contact notes and
Yeah.
stuff like that. And I saw some of that, and it's basically the same message. So maybe go through some of the messages that he was given by them in terms
Mhm.
of what's important. Like I think the nuclear weapons came up and the environment, and you hear this, it's almost like the same thing. People will say, oh, channel material, it's all different. It's like, did you get hit in the head with a windmill? I mean, you could not have possibly have read it. It's all the same story over and over. It's like, oh, here, and the oneness and all this kind of
Yeah.
stuff. Same stuff all the time. So talk a little bit about his keeping these notes and all this. It wasn't just the material, the photographs. He wasn't making money from anything.
Right. He wasn't. With the contact notes, it was very interesting though. He would come back from a contact and he would go to his office, and we had been there many times when this happened. And he would write down, he would get a telepathic signal, and he would write down the entire dialogue that took place. He still does that. He has an office full of these journals, huge blue binders that are full of all these contact notes. He talked about everything from we're not the only thinking beings in the universe, to how a person develops spiritually, to the fact that they cannot interfere with us yet, operative word yet, with the insinuation that if we got ready to blow ourselves up, they would, but nothing defined there. They said that there is no end to the universe. It doesn't exist, so they can't tell us what it is. That everything is constantly changing and evolving, including them. They are not, and this was something they're very concerned about. They don't want us to worship them. They don't want us to look at them as something so superior that we give all of our power up to them. They say they too are evolving just like people of Earth. And so it's very important to realize that all of these individuals that are coming in from these different off-world civilizations are not perfect either. And they're growing and they're developing, and we are too. And we have to be in a space where we're ready to accept them, their concepts, but not worship them. And that's a big deal because we always look for something greater than ourselves. That is a big problem with the Pleiadians. They want us to find the greater than ourself aspect in creation, which I understand not as a god or a deity, but in all things. It's really quite remarkable to think of it that way.
Yeah, and now you see it in all the contact literature, the same sort of thing. You know, there's no beginning, no end. Everything's alive. Everything's a verb. All this kind of stuff. Everything's evolving. And but you got to remember that at his time, this is long before other people started to discuss this. Has he made any plans for all for his material to survive after? Because you say he's in his 80s now. He's getting on in age.
He's 87. He
Wow.
has a center there where they keep everything, all of his notes and everything. Um, Other than that, the physical evidence we have,
Yeah.
and it's not going anywhere.
Wow. Yeah, you get that's the thing. You got the the material. And now you can even look now, the big thing is the metal fragments. It's like Jacques Vallée is running around, and the government people and stuff like that with these little pieces. And I basically say, like, what do you think? It came 100,000 light years to Earth, and then little pieces start falling off it. Come on, they're dropping it. And Billy was actually admitted they gave it to him, and that's the whole thing. Is they're working on? I think they're working on curiosity. So they're not giving you the answer, the full answer. They're giving you this thing which makes you curious and in awe, and that's when you do scientific investigation. Until there's an unknown, you're not going to do any investigation, and they sort of drag you along. It's almost like the story I now tell is Martin Luther, who created the Protestant religion. Actually, they claim they got him in a seance, and they asked him the same question, except about God. Why doesn't God get off his fat rear end and come down here and tell us what's going on? And he said, because doubt is part of the equation. If the soul knew all the answers, it would develop, it would grow wings and fly away and leave the body behind. The creator is the harvester, and we are the sowers, and God intends to keep the plow in the ground. It's this idea. So it's sort of like they're the thing where it's almost like sometimes it's almost like they're sabotaging they don't give enough to actually prove it, because they could actually come down, land on the White House lawn and tell us what's going on. They're not doing that. So they're doing this sort of indirect thing. And then poor people like you and Paola and Billy Meier have to take the flack for it and put this stuff out. But that's, I think what they're doing is they're just, because people will say, I mean, the photograph's not good enough, and then Billy got exactly the opposite. It's too good to be true. There's no way you can get photographs that are that clear.
Yeah, it's something though, when you look at what you said earlier, which I think is so important, where the world is now from 1975.
Yeah,
it's huge. The difference is so tremendous, and I think that's the value of all of this coming back out now at this particular time, because we can accept everything from that point forward. And now we're going to have to do some more catch up. But while we were doing the investigation, it was amazing, because we think, oh, we got an answer, and then 50 more questions would pop up. That's why it took 7 years. I mean, we just kept going, okay, let's take it here, let's take it there, let's learn more. And then you hit a space where you've hit every piece of equipment and all of the people that have the right initials behind their names, all of the doctors and scientists, and nobody can tell you what it is. They can only tell you they can't duplicate it. What do you do with that? Yeah.
And even the sample, I think the one sample I read, Desta and I were at James McDonald's collection in Tucson, Arizona, and Desta actually found it right at the very end. James McDonald was given a piece that came, I think, 1939 out of the sky, and it was 99+% pure nickel, and it had a copper core in it. And it was just sort of like a spike, and it came into this guy's a yard, into his garden in Illinois in 1939. And it was this idea, and so when I read in the book, that was the same thing. It's this high purity. Is you can't explain how could it get this pure? Why would someone make this and stuff like this? But it doesn't give you the answer. It just makes you scratch your head and run around and ask questions, which I think is part of what they want. They're not gonna do your homework for you. They want you to sort of figure it out, and they want us to unravel this thing. And 75, the other thing that people don't realize, they assume it's digital like it is now. And you were dealing the same as I was. I was taking the films back in 75, the photographs, and it was all 8mm. It was all 8mm movie film. I had 3 of them that I took of an object up close and stuff like that. And people don't realize it's actual film. It's not digital. Where, for example, one person brought up the thing where the one frame where it disappears, the object disappears, and then it reappears. And they said, well, he just stopped the camera and then he started the camera again. But apparently there's going to be one frame that's going to be blank. If you stop the camera and start again, there's going to be one frame. But you went through the film, correct? You went through, and there was no
frame by frame,
and there was no cuts. You'd be able to tell if someone put 2 pieces of film together and stuff like that.
There was no splicing, no editing. You can actually see in one of the movie clips, the craft is over here, and then it blinks out, and then it makes this jump over here. And they say that leap is easy because they have a screen they can put up where you can't see it. So it's what we visually capture with our eyes or with footage. Everything was really old school because it was 8mm footage, 35mm footage, either photographs or slides. The audio recordings were done on the old cassette tape recorders. So all of that was back 1975 technology. They didn't have cell phones that took great pictures and great movie footage. No, they didn't have Photoshop back then. People didn't have personal computers. Billy certainly didn't have any of that.
Yeah, like the one you're talking about with the where Billy called it jumping, where it's on the top of
Right.
the screen. Now we know, and that's one of the most famous stories in ufology, is the whole story about the Nimitz.
Yeah.
They're there with the Nimitz, and the object goes from 80,000 feet down to sea level in 7/8 of a second. And of course, it's viral. It's like, oh, these military guys, they saw this thing, and I'm going, that's Billy Meier. It's the same thing. It's this idea. And why did it do this? Like, why does a UFO go from 80,000 feet down to sea level? It's showing
Right.
off, same as it's doing to Billy Meier, is this, everybody says, oh, it's possible. You've got it on film. And that's the one where I got the Carmen thing, where it jumps from ground level to 5,000 feet in the air in 3 frames, 1/8 of a second. It jumps, and it's caught on film. So Billy Meier caught it on film. We caught it on film in Canada, and the Nimitz gets all the attention because it's military people. It's these guys and stuff. And if you listen to the guy who now owns Skinwalker Ranch, if you hear him tell the story, he talks about the fact the first sighting, he bought the ranch in 2016, and he's there with about 10 other 12 people there, and this UFO appears in the middle of the day, this saucer sitting there. And then he says it's there, and all of a sudden it's like boom, it's in a different part of the sky, and you can hear in his voice, it's like, wow, I couldn't believe it. It moved. Did you see that? And that's the same story, and you see it duplicated. But Billy was the first to actually do that. And so when I saw that in 75, when I saw the one jump, I knew we had that. So I said, this is a real deal. I mean, there's no way, because I had not made this public to anybody. And the other one you mentioned just now is the object is sitting there and then it disappears. Well, there's a story when Paola and I talk about next week about Wilbur Smith. Wilbur Smith has a story where the craft is on the ground, and suddenly the craft disappears, and they say, throw a stone, and he throws this stone, it goes dink, falls off the side of the craft, and they say that's just to show you we can bend the light around the craft, and it looks like the craft has disappeared. It's not. It's still there. They're just bending the light. So these are stories that when you've been in as long as I have, or you have, you realize this is not the first time somebody's telling this story. You have these definite patterns that prove that, yeah, whatever's going on, this guy was involved. He's got this pattern. He's got this pattern. Taking the notes as a child, the flash frames, all this sort of stuff. Where I'm going like, wow, this is pretty interesting stuff, and you can't prove it. So that's you got to realize that you're not going to. Skeptics are still going to have that left brain thing where they're going to come to a conclusion and they're going to stick to it. But I was just fascinated in the number of things when I was looking at it that I went, oh, I know this. This is a pattern. This is a pattern. This is a pattern. And so hopefully these contact notes will come out, because that's the important part to me, is the note of why are they here? What's really going on here? It's not like you fly across the universe to do nothing or to grab rocks. Because if you know the pattern is that 40% of all UFO experiencers say at one point during their experience they knew the answer to everything in the universe, and near-death experience say at one point during their experience they knew the answer to everything in the universe. And if it's the UFO experiencer and they at their point during their experience, then therefore the beings have the answer to everything. They're not coming here to investigate DNA and rocks and plants and stuff like that. They're basically doing something else. It's a higher mission than that. They're trying to talk to us and give us messages.
Well, there are many of the contact notes, fragments of them in the book, and as well as in the documentary. And we took some that we felt were really profound to put in there. And the point behind that is get people to think. Just read it and think about it. And at some point, I'm sure the contact notes will come back out and be re-released. They are available online, but they're difficult to read. It's a straight translation from Swiss German to English, and you can get really confused trying to read it. I have tried, and it is not as succinct. When we did this book, And when we did the documentary back in 82, we sat and talked with Billy, and we said, you know, this is how this reads in a direct translation. Does this mean the same as what we're putting into the book? And he said yes. So we're very comfortable with what's in the book and with what's in the documentary film from the words of the Pleiadians. But yeah, you can learn so much from any of these contactees. We just have got to have a place where we can go read and learn, watch and learn, or explore, like on shows like yours.
Beautiful.
And
Let me show share screen, and I want to show this this
Grant?
jumping. Go ahead, Paula, while I'm finding this.
In the 40 years of my research, I've been criticized more for this case than any. Because number one, people don't want to believe there's human type beings like us out there. And if you study, you know, Semyazi and Ptah and the people and they have names that visited Billy, they've even accused Asket as being one of the dancers on the Dean Martin show. And there is a photograph of her. And the thing is that you know, they don't want to believe that they're people like us because we are in an abduction kind of situation where the human type alien is kind of shoved into the background. If you were in Latin America, there's all space brothers walking off ships, and they don't, you know, look at it as that. They look at it as contact. And I just talked to an actor in Hollywood about 2 months ago, and he said, "Oh, that case is not real. It's all photoshopped." And Billy took, what do you call it, a fishing pole. I said Photoshop was not made until 1992. So your homework, I bother to look at the dates. And so I'm very grateful for you that you keep talking about the timeline and the geopolitical situation. If we want to look at what was happening in the world when they appeared, then we even get on another level. And I don't think this government was really excited about having pilgrims going up to Schmidt Rudy. But today, like today, you can go to the Billy Meier Semyazi garden in Schmidt Rudy because they are having people come there. So this story is not only real, people have to change their frame of reference that people have visited the earth, that, as Brit said, they feel like we're their little brothers and sisters.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And you do make the point that your attitude has a big effect on this, because I always say, you and I were working with the Mission Rama stuff, and I always tell people, I defy you to find, there's 25,000 Mission Rama people, I defy you to find anybody who's seen a gray, a reptilian, or a mantid. It's basically they're doing a different thing. Their beings are completely different, and it's you have this sort of where it's reflective of what we're doing. But it all comes down to this messaging, where the message is the most important thing, and everybody's into this sort of entertainment thing, which is what we had the highest level source ever. It was Dr. Eric Walker from the early days, and he actually said to us, "Why should we change the rules and regulations to satisfy your curiosity? Admit it, you're just curious." And the 99.9% of the UFO community, that's all it is. It's like entertainment. They just want it. They're really not interested in. So when you get into the message thing, they're not really interested in that. They're just interested in seeing, you know, some sort of lights in the skies or videos or stuff like that. And in terms of videos, I'm going to show the video. Can you see my screen?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so here's Paula's partner here, Jacques Ballet. I'll give you the background how this thing happened. And I believe now, looking 30 years back, that this was all intentional. As I said, the Meier thing started January 28th. The sightings in Carmen started a couple days after, at the beginning of February. And my friend, I said, let's go out, let's go see what they're looking at instead of driving around the city. He said, okay, we'll go. We never went because I had no interest in UFOs or whatever. And this film was the one that got me dragged in. It was taken, I think, May the 11th, 1975. And it's a jumping film. It's a flash frame. So what happens is the thing's on the ground. There's a TV crew there. They almost get it on film. They don't get it to go back to the TV station. And the assistant news producer says to them, "That's enough of this UFO nonsense. nobody's going out anymore. You guys want to go and chase stupid UFOs, you can go on your own time. So they got a volunteer crew together with a guy who'd never shot a television camera before in his life. And they went out in May of 1975, and this thing is on the ground. They realized this thing's on the ground. The camera is 8 1/3 mile away from where the shot is taken. And they send 2 cars, one on the north side, one on the south side, to try to get this thing surrounded. And the one actually gets right close to it. And they're maybe a third of a mile away, a quarter mile away. The thing is standing on an angle like a TV movie, a drive-in movie screen, and it's not touching the ground. And they go, wow, it's right there. And it's blood red, it's 650 feet high. And they look around, and then suddenly the thing is gone. And they thought it had disappeared. Actually, the guy at the other end of the road, 8 1/3 miles away, he had this idea. He said, well, next time it glows up, they didn't get a shot last night. Next time it glows up, I'm going to shoot. And as he pushes the trigger, this thing jumps in the air. So here's Jacques Vallée narrating this film. And the weird thing about the film was that when I talked to the guy who had the film, he actually took it because he didn't get paid for it. And he said, that's it. You know, NBC wanted to do interviews and stuff. And he said, they never paid me. So when I left the station, I took the film with me. And these 2 6-inch of film, he took it with him. And I said, can I get a copy? He said, well, no, I don't want a copy. Every time I make copies, they all start to disappear. So eventually he made me a 3rd generation copy of this thing. And when I sold my house 14 years ago, it was on a 6-inch reel. Do you think I could find that 6-inch metal reel? It was gone. And so here we're still trying to find the original film. It was from UFOs Past, Present, Future, which was done in 1975. And here's Jacques Vallée narrating this jumping film here. And this is what got me involved. When I saw this film, they played it for 8 minutes. They showed it frame by frame. It had 8 echoes in it. It was going up and down. It was rotating. It's just a totally bizarre film, but it jumps from ground level to 5,000 feet in the air in 3 frames, and it's 8 1/4 miles away.
1975, Manitoba, Canada. Unidentified flying objects have been reported over the small town of Carmen. The objects have been seen by many witnesses over a period of several weeks. May 13th, 1975, cameraman Alan Carr of station CKY in Manitoba photographs 2 separate sightings over Carmen in front of 4 witnesses. The first sighting occurs at approximately 10:30 p.m. The object appears to be stationary just above the ground. Then, almost simultaneous with a flash which appears in the sky, the object moves north at blinding speed. Only when the film is later analyzed in slow motion does Carr realize what he has captured photographically. Approximately an hour later, a second sighting occurs. The object appears over a group of trees and moves from left to right at an apparently low relative altitude to the horizon. Again, slow motion analysis provides a fascinating study of this unexplained event.
So there you see, it's actually, I think it was one. I think I interviewed everybody in the crew, and it was just one sighting. It jumped up in the air, and then it went across, and he stopped the camera at one point to get a frame of reference with some stars, and that's when he got the second 6-inch piece of film. But you saw that flash frame. So it was at the bottom of the frame. Then there was this flash frame. You could see the entire horizon, one frame, 1/24th of a second, the entire light, the horizon lights. And then it's in the next frame, it's on the top of the frame. So, and it's 8 1/4 miles away. So that was when I always knew that when I saw the Meier film, this thing was jumping. I said, well, it's the same year. It's exactly the same sort of display that was done. So I was very impressed with the case, but I never really until now got to tell people the story of this connection between the two.
Wow, that is fascinating.
So here's this was the people on the ground. This is what they saw on the ground. Come on, pop up. This is what the object was on the ground. They surrounded the thing, and it was behind these trees. It was sitting on an angle, and then it just jumped up in the air, and that's why I went. And I always say, looking back, I say, if they had not made that film, I never would have gotten involved in UFOs. It's almost like they knew I wasn't going to go, so they arranged this thing to get caught on the ground and allow someone to film it to get me dragged out there to do this. Now let's maybe the Meier flash frame. It's taken a long time to make these things. This is the one we were talking about before here with the hang on. This is the one you were talking about here with Meier, where it's up in the top there. And I actually checked the clouds when I played it. The clouds don't change. So it's not like they had two different shots, one day, one day. The clouds are exactly the same. So that shot is taking place where it jumps from the top right of the screen down to the bottom in like, I think it was, I think you said it was like the same frame, or the next
Same
frame
frame.
was the same
Yes.
frame. Yeah, it's
Same
in
frame.
two spots. And then that's pretty dramatic when you see that. I mean, it's totally inexplicable, but people will still deny that. And that's why it was so important to point out the fact that you guys were working with film. This was not digital. It's not Photoshop where you can play around with different things.
Well, in the book, we actually we laid that strip of film down so that you can see it at the top, and then as it appears over the horizon right there. And it's absolutely remarkable. And it's so common. This happens so often with people that get footage.
Yeah. Or you see the ones where I remember the second night when I dragged all my friends out there, the second night, the thing appeared as a flash. The first night it was this red plasma object. Second night, it started as a flash in the sky. And one of the kids yelled at me, said, "Is that it?" And I go, "Oh, I guess so." And then it started jumping around the sky. And I remember there was one family that was really oppressed by everybody. The whole nobody in the town would talk to them, and yet everybody in the town was seeing it. They didn't want to become the Lehmans. And one time I went to visit them, and their kids were there. And so they said, "Well, our parents are going to be home right away." And so I figured, well, this is the chance I'll interview these kids. I said, "So, did you see anything?" And they go, "Yeah, we look out that night. We watched the bouncing ping pong ball." And I go, "Oh yeah, the pong." And because what happened the second night was there was a car there, and the guy was unloading the camera, had a Nikon with a motor drive on it. And he was unloading the camera as this thing was flashing, it was jumping around the sky, and it was coming towards us. And this one girl couldn't see it. She's crying, "I can't see it. I can't see it. Someone show it to me." And people are yelling and screaming. It was just like pandemonium. Again, this is this thing where they're doing this display. They don't have to jump around the sky. They're doing that because they want to get you in this state of sort of awe as to what is going on. What are they doing? And they get your attention, and then they present the message. I mentioned to Paola the one time, it was sort of like they're doing the Jesus act. Unless you heal people and walk across water, nobody's going to listen to your message. So you do all these miracle things, and then you give them the message. You don't do the message before you do the sort of stuff that gets everybody's attention.
True.
Why do we have little tiny? This is one of the ones. Maybe talk a little bit about this one here. You have a lot of this shows the clarity of the photos. And you guys did all the measurements. You had a crew. Had another guy. What was the guy's name? Welch? No, was his
Tom Welch.
Yeah, Welch.
Yeah, so Tom Welch is our associate. He's we took all the measurements, the distance from the camera to the tree line, and then the trees in the back and the little tree directly underneath the craft. When we had this digitized so we could look at the edges of everything, we could triangulate the distance from the camera to the craft based on what we saw in the trees from the point of the camera. And then we could also determine the size by triangulation. It told us that that object is 21 feet in diameter. I mean, knowing how tall the trees are, how far the distance is, you can triangulate the size. And that was 21 feet in diameter. This is a series of pictures that was taken at over satellite. It's a wonderful, beautiful place. Not a lot of people around. And this is where Billy frequently had contacts.
Wow.
It's so beautiful. Looks just like that.
And he's still having contacts. That's fascinating.
Yes, he is.
I made a list. I'll just go through some of the things that I noticed that he brought up that we knew later, but he was the first to sort of bring them up. He talked about this force field, and I experienced this in 1976, where when you get really close to the craft, if it's powered up, it seems to have a field around it that prevents people from getting in too close. Right. And it's sort of mine was it's sort of like this fear. Chris Bledsoe had the same thing. He tried to go near it. It was in this field, and he was trying to crawl there, and he got so far, he got close to it, and then he couldn't go any farther, and then he turned back, and he said, "That's stupid. I'm going to go right up." And then he tried again, and he could only get like within 50 feet of the craft, and he couldn't get any closer to it.
Oh,
So
wow.
Billy Meier was the first to talk about this force field thing. So when you see that, you go, "Oh, how could he possibly make this up in 1975?" Nobody had reported this yet. I experienced it in 76, but I never talked about it. And then he talks about the swirls, like they would later become crop circles, but you had the swirls in the grass with the counterclockwise, and the grass wouldn't grow properly and stuff like that. He was the first on that, because later it was the crop circles, but by then he had already discussed this years before. So
And it attracted all the bugs. I
Yeah.
mean, it was like every bug in the canton had arrived at that crop circle. And those were what he called landing tracks. Yeah.
Yeah. And he talked about no end to the universe. That's now pretty common. It wasn't that
Right.
common in then. The 1 second is 1,000 years. This idea of time and space, that is now being questioned by quantum physics. And if you look at the DMT, the spirit molecule documentary, the guy's actually on there, and he said, "How long was I gone?" And the guy said, 10 minutes. He said, 1,000 years in 10 minutes. But Billy Meier was one of the first to describe this, that in the contact, what they were told is this idea about time and space. And
it's
he was
our
way
creation. As
Yeah.
we know it now, time and space are our creation. For them, it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Time does
Yeah.
not exist and space does not exist.
Yeah, and even this idea of us creating it, that
Yeah.
it's made out of consciousness, which I'll maintain.
Exactly.
It's sort of like God does not create the heaven and the earth. God creates the sparks of the divine, and they create the heaven and the earth out of consciousness. We're building this as we're going along, and it's getting grander and more complex and stuff like that. And we're just adding in. It gets bigger and bigger and more
Right.
complex. And it's not like, because everybody has this nuts and bolts view that God creates the heaven and the earth, and then He puts the spirit inside. And no, consciousness is primary. And even the quantum physics guys from 100 years ago said that consciousness is primary. Nothing gets behind consciousness. So consciousness creates matter, not the other way around. And Billy in these
Absolutely.
contact notes, it's the same stuff. It's when I was reading it, I'd really like to see it, because now I'm intending to do this book on the messages going back all the way, and who I think might be doing it, and the fact that it may be just something that's coming to us as a certain thing. They used to come as angels and stuff. Now it's like aliens and stuff like that. But it's the message that's important, because we're never going to be able to prove one way or the other this sort of stuff, or even the bodies and crafts. It's people, they're interested in the bodies and crafts. And even this Jim Semivan, who's got the briefing, said, because you have bodies and crafts doesn't mean you know what's going on or what we're dealing with. And that's the thing, is there's still this mystery. And that's the whole deal, is the mystery is what drives you. It's what gets us curious. Otherwise, you would just go on and your ego would say, "I've got this all figured out," and just sit there and wait.
No,
So
nothing is ever figured out. It's like they say, you evolve. Your consciousness evolves, your knowledge evolves, everything. But you have to keep up with what happened in the past to understand what's happening now.
what were the biggest complaints that you had to deal with? One, I guess, would be the idea of the strings. And I think you mentioned in the documentary the thing about if you digitalize it, you'd be able to see the string. If
Absolutely.
that wouldn't be discovered in 75, but once you got into the digitalized thing where the pixels and stuff, and you could blow it up, and then you can actually see if there's a string. Actually, you can't hide the string in a visual photo. You can hide it, but not if you digitalize it, and then you can see it.
Not in a 35 millimeter film frame.
Yeah.
You, as soon as it's digitized, you see every flaw. So you know if it's something pasted on, you know if it's something suspended. And one of the biggest things that it irritated me, everybody says, well, Billy made a model, and it's just a model that he did. We made the model, and it's in the documentary film. We hired Wally Gentleman, who was a special effects person in Hollywood for years and years, worked with Kubrick, Coppola, all of them. He made us a little model, and we suspended it, and we took photographs that looked really good. And then we ran them down to U of A, had them digitized. You could tell they were a small model suspended on a string. So where people say, oh, that's just a model, that's all that is. No, that picture right there is not a model. We made a model, we photographed it, and we could tell it was a model. But Billy didn't have a model, and we went all through his farm. We found nothing.
That was Jim Del Tosa that did that.
Jim did a lot of the photogrammetric work. He
Yeah.
was really great, and he had such good contacts that
Yeah, and he had a
got
big
us
studio.
into- Pardon?
He had a big studio. He was
Yes, he
an
did.
expert at this kind of stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's not really doing the photogrammetric work so much anymore. He's working in other areas of science. He's one of the most brilliant minds I know. I call him my lost Atlantean soul. He's just one of those, he's going everywhere. Yeah.
And he did the Phoenix Lights as well, right?
Yes, he did. He did a lot of work with him with Dr. Lin. Yeah.
Yeah. Fascinating. The other big complaint, I guess, is the ex-wife later on. Can you go through that whole thing?
Yeah, it was a really contentious divorce. I have Poppy on film talking about her experiences seeing the craft, recording the craft, the audio. And then she comes out after this contentious divorce and says, it's a hubcap. That's not a hubcap. No, I could understand it. It's kind of sad, but I can't understand why she would be so angry. I mean, her life was turned upside down, as was Billy's. People showed up at 3 o'clock in the morning demanding attention from Billy. We were there when that happened many, many times. Very sad.
Yeah, there's a lot of people coming there to see him as well without any invites, right?
Yeah, it doesn't happen so much anymore. They actually have no trespassing signs on the property now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because
when was the last time you were
got out
there?
of control. He's had assassination attempts.
Yeah.
No, we have to learn to respect these people that have these experiences.
Yeah,
And
especially
here. Yeah.
Go ahead. Yep.
A little bit to this because I went when I was living in Italy, so it was like 2004, and I really wanted to talk to Billy, and there was a group there that was protecting Billy. I don't think they're there anymore, called FIGU, but they wouldn't let me talk to him. But he kept staring at me. He has like this psychic ability, and 6 o'clock they said that we had to leave, we Italians, because we didn't speak German. So they were going to have a peace meditation, and I didn't understand why we couldn't do it too. So I went down into the Semyazi garden with my Italian friends, and who do I see come down there but Billy? And he's staring right at me over the gate. I was wondering why he wasn't with the other group, but he sent me Guido Musbrugger, who wrote the book And Still Lay Fly. And he was very kind. He sent Guido Musbrugger over to me, and Guido Musbrugger has since passed. He was a skeptical, I think, physician or doctor. And
he was a school principal, school superintendent. Yeah.
And he came over and he said, I speak English. Billy said that any question you have, I can answer for you. So on a psychic level, they were doing their peace meditation. We were there, the Italians, we sat in the garden down at the bottom near the parking lot and did ours. But that was an experience for me because I think, and Brit, I mean, you would have to have some psychic ability, have some intuition to live through all this. He came down and looked at me over the fence, and I from that point on began to speak in favor of this case because I had personally gone there. I saw the hole through the tree of the weapon that he was given. I saw everything that was written in the books.
Yeah.
Can
I make a comment about this photograph? Because I love this picture.
Yeah, this is the cover of the book, right? And
right.
What about the documentary? Is the documentary going to be, is people are able, because one of the things that's very impressive in the documentary is you see a guy with one arm. I mean, it's like there's 3 objects in the air, like he throws 3 objects and then he gets the camera with his one hand. I mean, this is crazy. When you actually see the guy's only got one arm, it really adds some credibility. But this is the cover of the book, right?
Right. It's also the cover of the documentary film. of the
Okay.
same name, except it's UFO Contact from the Pleiades, a documentary film. The thing I love about this image, the craft is far behind the tree. And when you digitize that picture, you can see the branch curl up in front of the craft.
Yeah.
And that's, to me, that's one of the most powerful pictures there is. We call it sunlight scene. It was a series taken over Hassenbowl in Switzerland. Just beautiful.
And there was what, 6 different models, 5 different models, 6 different
Yeah,
models?
six
models.
different variations of craft. The first one they could no longer use because it actually leaked radiation. And we found that to be true because we brought in Wheeltierburg, which does a lot of nuclear work in Switzerland. They came out, they found gamma radiation readings so high, they were still pegging the meter at the original contact site. And this was 7 years after the original contact. Billy's belt buckle was hot. His moped was hot. So the gamma radiation levels in that area, they wanted to call them the Swiss nuclear regulatory people. We got them not to do that, thank goodness. But it was amazing, the residual gamma radiation, which can really affect a human being as well as plant life and animal life.
Wow. Question I'd forgotten to ask. A lot of times you see with contactees, experiencers, is that they get other sort of talents. Did Billy ever have, and you can talk maybe about the contact notes, about the predictions, but that was made by the beings. But
Right.
did he ever have any other events, psychic events, or was he telepathic?
No, he seemed to develop a sense of telepathy stronger.
Okay.
I think he probably had it from the time he had his first contact when he was 5. And just that communicative ability. Not particularly, but then he's a different kind of contactee. Not in the city, very earthy, very connected to the land, to feeling what people are all about is just part of that. It's part of that interconnectivity. Just Billy is Billy. He's just still a wonderful guy.
And the predictions, I noticed there, I saw some that were like, wow. I remember the credit card one, even though when I went and Googled it, there was diner cards that were before that, plastic cards. But when I saw the thing about the credit cards, that everything's going to go to a credit card and no money, I was like, wow, like that's
Headed that way, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, the Pleiadians have an interesting thing because they don't have linear time like we do. They have an event clock. So if event A happens and event B happens, event C is going to happen.
Okay.
But if A happens and B doesn't happen, C won't happen. So that's how they present what they see as their predictive abilities for us. We've seen it firsthand. We were in Switzerland when Sadat was killed, Sadat of Egypt.
Yeah.
We got back to the farmhouse and there was a cross on the screen of the TV, all of this dirge music playing. And we asked Billy, is it real? Did one man assassinate Sadat? And he says, no, that's not true. But that's what the report was at the time. He went into his office, got this huge, big ledger, pulled it out, starts going through the papers. He says, see right here, it says he will be killed in a military parade. They don't have a date or time. It's events that lead up to this. But he was killed in a military parade. Many people were injured, killed, and it was not one individual shooter. It wasn't until the next day that that was brought out to the public. So we were present when things like that happened. That's one of those things you can't, what do you do with it?
Yeah, that's powerful when you're actually, it's one thing to read it, it's another to be in the event, because that's what changes people. It's not somebody convincing you, it's experience that changes your attitude. So the question would be, I mean, if you had to do it again, would you do it again?
Absolutely. In a heartbeat.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
I'm still doing it. Like you said, it's a rabbit hole. You get into this subject, you do not get out.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
There's too many questions. And if you have the least little bit of curiosity, you got to go play in it.
Yeah. And that's the thing with the experience. That's the idea, is that it creates this awe and wonder, and you can't figure it out, but you can't leave. And I used to make the joke when people say, well, this guy left, he's had it, whatever. I say, yeah, don't worry, he'll be back. Everybody comes back. Nobody leaves. But you do have the experience with the families. You mentioned with the wife. I mean, what you'll have with experiencers is very hard to keep a marriage together. If the one is having all the experiences and getting all the attention, it's pretty hard on. And I guess there was lots of people there, and it was very hard on the family. So what happened to the kids? Did they carry on, or they're not interested? Because my son has no interest whatsoever, even though he's had a UFO sighting and he talked to my dad's father and stuff like that. He's busy trying to pay his mortgage.
It's a generational thing too. Billy's kids, yeah. We were there when his daughter was coming home from school and 2 men in a van tried to kidnap her.
Oh,
She
no.
wanted really nothing to do with this. The youngest one, Methuselah, we called Bashinko, he said the kids at school called him UFO Meier, and he felt very intimidated. Atlantis is still interested. Atlantis is actually living at the farm with his father. And, he went away, he came back, but he's interested in what's happening with the contacts from both the past and the present. So 1 out of 3. Yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah. What do you think, sort of to wrap up, what do you think is the main thing that people should take in terms of learning from this? What's the message that you would leave with people?
That we're not the only thinking beings out there in the universe, but that we have to think. We have got to balance our spiritual life and our technology. And we have got to be less warring with each other. We have to learn to respect and communicate with each other on this planet if we expect to do that out in the universe. And at some point, we will be in the universe. But right now, we've got to start here and learn that between each other.
Wow. Well, thank Billy for all he's done.
I'm
sure he doesn't get many congratulations and stuff like that. He's sort of been forgotten. And it's good you brought it back up again, because that's what it comes down to in terms of consciousness, is that people fight and they talk and back and forth. But the more people talk about it, the more it's going to be a situation where in the end, the young generation will be able to figure it out, but they have to hear about it. So you can't let it fall away. You got to keep bringing it back up. Paula, what would you say is the bottom line? You worked with the contactees of the 1950s. So what would you say is the main lesson we should take from all of this?
Message is really the same, that we are one. We are an indigenous species to this planet, which means all of us humans are indigenous. We're the ones that cause the border and separation. And there is real data out there. If you don't believe, just get the book Contact from the Pleiades, and there's data. If people do the research, I have a master's in education, so as a teacher, I can't give you a grade if you just give me a YouTube video. You're going to need to do your homework. And that's what's been so great talking to you both. Thank you very much for inviting me. It's been a wonderful conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, you got to spend more than 8 seconds. That's, I think, the main problem we got.
Exactly.
Is you watch somebody on a cell phone, you realize it's 8 seconds. It's like, and everybody knows more than the generals about everything. Sort of like everybody's got an opinion. So that's why I never read. Desta, have you got any questions? You've probably read all this stuff, and you probably even read the contact notes. You got anything you want to jump in here and ask?
Definitely not jump in and ask. I mean, it was a great conversation. I listened to the whole thing, and yeah, I think that's a nice rounded message that everyone usually has from this space, right? From the contactees and from the other beings, is that we are all one, and we gotta make peace, not war, and get together and move things forward.
Beautiful. Yeah. Desta has the ability to channel. She's done the 2 channeling books, And that was the whole thing, was when I realized that, then I started asking, ask them this, ask them that. And it's the same thing. If you got someone who's got in contact with higher beings or God or whoever they're talking to, why would you take that off the table? Why would you ever say, oh, this is not study it and see if you can learn something from it? So that's, I think, what basically what it comes down to is this is an opportunity for people to learn something, and that's where we got to go. We got to, advance ourselves, and there are people who have gotten in the field and who have these contacts, and they should be appreciated. So thanks for everything. There was something I wanted to end with, but no, it's oh, I wanted to ask you last question. What are you planning to do now? You say you're still busy. Have you got anything in the works that we should be looking forward to?
Well, I've got a couple of books that I'm playing with. I haven't decided exactly what to do with them, but I think it would be beneficial to tell the story behind the story of the Meier case from the investigative perspective, but not delving into the investigation, just the various things that we experienced while we were there, what Meier was really like as a person. Because volume 1 has everything. It has a little of Meier's story. It has a little of the messages. It has a little of the investigation, the hard science. I think people might be interested in knowing what it was really like back in 1975 when we met Billy and he was washing his face in a horse trough. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm working on that and a couple other things as well.
Hopefully you'll have them ready by next May when we get together in Crestone, and
That would be fun. I'm looking forward to that. Thank you guys for the invitation.
Beautiful. And the last thing I would say to people, because I think everybody's here has done this, maybe not Desta, but all of us have been in this an awful long time, is people have to absolutely realize it is a completely different world than it was in 1975. You can't go back and say this, I know that. You did not know. In 75, it was very simple. There was some extraterrestrials flying around here, and the government had the answer, and there was one piece to put in the puzzle, and we're going to get these crafts and we're going to fly them around, and it's just gotten more complex and more complex as we go along. It's a completely different world than it is now. People have no idea what it was like to do UFOs without computers, with a pen, a piece of paper, sending mail, with long distance phone calls that were hundreds of dollars and stuff. It's a completely different world. People have to realize that, I think.
Very true. Very true. If I could add one little thing to close on.
Yeah.
And I think this is so important. There are so many experiencers and stories that they've presented or that they have. Always respect the individual giving that story and hear what they're saying. Learn to listen, because that's where you learn, is if you're hearing what is actually being said. And that only comes through respect. Whether you want to believe their case or not, it doesn't matter. You can still learn something from each other if you take that position.
Exactly, because it's not exactly something that people want to come out and say, I got, an encounter with an alien. It's like, it's the last thing people are thinking about doing.
Exactly.
So you got to respect the fact that when they come forward, they're taking a big risk, and they should be respected for that. And that's where I go in terms of dealing with, I say you cannot learn anything. Well, in fact, high level people have actually said that, because you cannot control the phenomena, you watch those that the phenomena affects. Lights in the sky have no usable information. You got to, if you want to know what's going on, you got to talk to the people who are interacting with the intelligence. What other choice would you have? You can count all the red ones and green ones and colors and shapes and stuff. It doesn't tell you. You got to talk to the people who are actually in contact with whatever this phenomena, whatever this intelligence is. And I appreciate you bringing your story forward, and hopefully we can do it again soon. And it was an honor to have met you, and get better. I've got my health issue, and you got your health issue, and we made it to the end of the show. So thanks a lot.
We did. Thank you, guys. Thank you for the invitation, Grant. This has been absolutely wonderful.
Beautiful. And we'll share it around and get some people angry and get some people excited, and share the message and raise the consciousness.
Yes. Thanks, Paola.
You, Brit.